My name is Ava Collins, and I was 8 months pregnant when my mother-in-law decided to turn my baby shower into a public trial. But this didn't start at the party. It started weeks earlier, quietly, the way control always does. I remember the exact night it began because my feet were swollen, my back ached, and I was lying on the couch trying to sleep while my husband, Mark, paced the living room with his phone pressed to his ear. I didn't need to hear both sides of the conversation to know who it was. His tone changed only for one person. His mother, Eleanor. She was talking fast, sharp, organized, like she was running a corporate meeting instead of planning a baby shower. I could hear her voice through the speaker even though Mark tried to lower it. "I've finalized everything," she said. "Venue, decorations, guest list. Ava doesn't need to worry about a thing." "Not ask Ava. Inform Ava." Mark glanced at me like he was checking whether I'd object. "Mom's handling it," he said softly after hanging up. "It'll be easier this way." Easier for who, I wondered, but I didn't say it out loud. The next morning, Eleanor called me directly. That alone felt intentional. "Ava, dear," she said, her voice syrupy, the kind of sweetness that always came with teeth. "I just want you to rest. Planning events requires experience." I suggested a simple theme, something neutral. She interrupted me mid-sentence. "I already chose something more appropriate." "You've never hosted a large gathering, have you?" The pause said everything. Then she added it, the sentence she used like a knife every time. "If your mother were around, she'd understand." My mother had passed away years earlier. Eleanor knew that. She always knew exactly where to press. A week before the shower, we had dinner at Eleanor's house. I wore a soft gray maternity dress I loved because it made me feel like myself. Halfway through the meal, Eleanor set down her fork and said loudly, "That color is bold." The room went quiet. "Gray can make a woman look tired, especially when she's carrying," she continued, smiling. "But comfort is important, I suppose." Mark cleared his throat but said nothing. No one did. Silence was the family language. After dinner, Mark's sister, Lauren, followed me into the hallway. She looked nervous, glancing toward the dining room. "Can we talk tomorrow?" she whispered. "Somewhere private." The urgency in her voice tightened my chest. The next day, we met at a cafe. She didn't touch her coffee. "I work at a financial office," she said finally. "I was reviewing linked accounts. I saw a transfer from yours and Mark's savings. $12,000. My stomach dropped. "That's impossible," I said. Lauren swallowed. "It came from an account with secondary access. Your mother-in-law's name is on it." That night, Mark confronted his mother. I watched his expression change as she spoke. "She said she borrowed it," he told me afterward. "For a gift." "She said she forgot to mention it." "Forgot." $12,000. I told him that wasn't borrowing. That was theft. He rubbed his face and said the words I'd grown to hate. "You know how she is. Please don't bring this up at the shower. I don't want drama." That was the moment something in me shifted. I didn't argue. I just nodded. But I stopped protecting her with my silence. The day before the shower, Eleanor called again. She told me what color to wear to match the decorations. When I said I already had a dress, she laughed softly. "I planned a little surprise for you," she said. "Something personal. I think everyone will enjoy it." Personal. The word sat heavy in my stomach. That night, my best friend Mia came over. She listened to everything, the money, the comments, the surprise. "You're walking into a trap," she said calmly. "So walk in prepared." The morning of the baby shower, I stood in front of the mirror, one hand on my belly, the other holding a printed bank statement. I didn't know what Eleanor had planned, but I knew one thing. If she tried to humiliate me, I would not stay quiet. Not anymore. Eleanor's house looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine the moment we arrived. Soft pastel balloons framed the doorway, flowers were arranged with military precision, and a large banner hung across the living room that read "Welcome Baby Carter" in gold letters. 50 people filled the space, laughing, sipping drinks, admiring everything. Everyone except me. I felt like a guest at my own event. Eleanor moved through the room like a queen inspecting her court, accepting compliments, nodding graciously, making sure everyone knew this was her production. When she spotted me, she swept over and wrapped her arms around me tightly, too tightly. "Our glowing mama," she announced loudly. As she pulled back, she whispered so only I could hear, "I'm glad you wore something neutral. It won't distract from what's coming." My stomach tightened. I scanned the room and noticed something that made my chest sink. Near the gift table stood Hannah, Mark's ex-girlfriend. Perfect hair, soft smile, wearing the exact color that matched the decorations. When she saw me, she hesitated, then gave a polite wave like she wasn't sure she should even be there. I walked past her without stopping, my heart pounding. Mia found me near the window and leaned close. "She invited his ex," she murmured. I nodded. "On purpose," I said quietly. Eleanor was watching us from across the room, her expression satisfied. An hour passed in forced conversations and polite smiles. Every few minutes, Eleanor glanced at the clock. She was waiting for something. Then, exactly on schedule, she tapped her glass with a spoon. The sound cut through the chatter instantly. "Everyone, if I could have your attention," she said warmly. "Before we open gifts, I prepared something very special for Ava." She reached for a white envelope resting on the mantel. My heart started racing. This was it. Before she could continue, Lauren rushed in through the front door, slightly out of breath. Her eyes locked onto mine immediately. She crossed the room quickly and grabbed my hand. "I heard Mom on the phone last night," she whispered urgently. She was talking about a list. "I don't know what's on it, but she sounded excited." My mouth went dry. Eleanor's smile tightened. "Lauren," she said sharply. "You're interrupting." Lauren squeezed my hand once before stepping back. "Just remember what you have," she whispered. She always writes things down. I took a deep breath and walked to the center of the room. Eleanor handed me the envelope like she was presenting an award. Inside, she announced proudly, is a list I've carefully written. 40 reasons my son should reconsider his marriage. Gasps rippled through the room, followed by laughter. Nervous laughter. Someone said, "Oh, Eleanor, you're terrible." Mark laughed too, shaking his head like it was a harmless joke. "Come on," he said. "Read it." Eleanor's eyes never left my face. She wanted to see me crumble. I opened the envelope. Inside were neatly typed pages, numbered carefully. The first few were petty. Too career-focused. Not traditional enough. Too opinionated. Each line drew another chuckle from the crowd. Eleanor watched, pleased. Then my eyes landed on number 18. My breath caught. I read it again to make sure. It was written casually, like an afterthought. She doesn't even know I accessed their savings account for a small loan. Proof she doesn't pay attention to finances. My hand steadied. My heart stopped racing. She'd written it down. Her confession. In her own words. I looked up. The room was still laughing, unaware. Eleanor tilted her head. "Find a good one, dear?" she asked sweetly. I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said. "This one's important." The laughter faded as people sensed the shift. I held the page up slightly. Number 18, I read clearly. She doesn't even know I accessed their savings account for a small loan. Silence crashed into the room. Complete, heavy silence. I continued calmly. For clarity, the amount was $12,000. And I do know. Because I have the bank statement. Eleanor's face drained of color so fast it was frightening. That's private," she stammered. Mark stepped forward, confusion turning into shock. "Mom," he said slowly. "You took money from our account?" Lauren spoke up from the back. "I saw the transaction myself." Whispers erupted instantly. "Theft. Bank account." She admitted it. Eleanor looked around, searching for support, but no one stepped in. Hannah's face went pale. "You told me Ava wanted me here," she said quietly. "That wasn't true, was it?" Eleanor's perfect image shattered in seconds. Voices overlapped. Questions flew. Accusations surfaced from years ago, things people had kept buried. An aunt spoke about lies. A cousin mentioned money that went missing once. Eleanor backed toward the door, shaking. Mark finally found his voice. "You planned this," he said. "You tried to humiliate my wife." He took my hand. "You need to leave." Eleanor stared at him like she didn't recognize her own son. "You're choosing her," she whispered. "I'm choosing my family," he replied. She left without another word. The door closed behind her, and the room exhaled. No one laughed now. No one spoke for a moment. Then Mia squeezed my shoulder. "You didn't expose her," she whispered. "She exposed herself." I looked around the room at faces that no longer saw me as the problem. For the first time, I wasn't standing alone. The room stayed frozen for several seconds after Eleanor walked out, like everyone needed permission to breathe again. Then conversation started quietly, unsure, fragmented. Someone picked up a dropped napkin. Someone else awkwardly suggested cutting the cake. The decorations that had looked so perfect an hour earlier now felt absurd, like props left behind after a play ended badly. Mark still stood beside me, his hand wrapped tightly around mine, as if letting go might undo the choice he'd just made. His jaw was tense, his eyes red, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked shaken in a way that couldn't be smoothed over with excuses. Lauren came over first. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice low. "I should have warned you sooner." I shook my head. "You did enough," I replied honestly. Around us, relatives hovered, some offering quiet words of support, others just watching me like they were reassessing everything they thought they knew. Hannah slipped out without a word, her presence no longer relevant now that the truth was out. Mia stayed close, her phone still in her hand, not recording anymore, just ready. Later that evening, after most of the guests had left, a small group remained in the living room. Mark, me, Lauren, and his Aunt Denise sat around the coffee table. The house was too quiet without Eleanor's voice filling it. "First thing tomorrow," Mark said, breaking the silence, "I'm removing her access to our accounts." Lauren nodded. "That should have happened years ago." I added softly, "And the money?" Mark exhaled. "If she doesn't return it, we'll deal with it legally." Saying the words out loud seemed to solidify something in him. That night at home, everything felt different. The apartment was the same, but the air felt lighter, like something toxic had finally been aired out. Mark sat on the couch scrolling through his phone. "She's calling everyone," he said quietly. "No one's answering." I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that, but I didn't feel guilty either. Silence had protected her for too long. This was the cost of truth. Mark finally looked at me. "I'm sorry," he said. "For all the times I didn't step in." I believed him, not because of the words, but because of what he'd done. 2 days later, the money reappeared in our account. No message. No explanation. Just the exact amount transferred back. Lauren called to confirm it. "She didn't attach a note," she said. "Just sent it." Mark stared at the screen for a long time. "That's not an apology," he said. "No," I agreed. "But it's a start." We both knew it wasn't enough. A week passed. Then another. Eleanor didn't reach out to me at all. She sent Mark a long email instead, explaining her intentions, justifying her actions, framing herself as misunderstood. She never used the word sorry. Mark showed it to me, his expression tired. She still thinks she was right, he said. Then nothing changes, I replied gently. Boundaries only work if they stay firm. He nodded and didn't respond to her email. 3 months later, our daughter was born. Holding her for the first time rewired something in me. All the anger, the fear, the humiliation shrank in comparison to the responsibility I felt in that moment. I would not let this child grow up learning that love meant control or silence. Eleanor wasn't at the hospital. She hadn't asked to be. Mark told her about the birth with a single message. Her reply was short. Congratulations. No name. No request to visit. Life moved forward. Slowly, quietly, peacefully. Then one afternoon, a handwritten letter arrived in the mail. Cream-colored paper. Eleanor's handwriting. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. She wrote about fear, about loneliness, about mistakes she could no longer ignore. She wrote the words I'd been waiting for. I am sorry. Not qualified. Not explained away. Just sorry. My hands shook as I folded the letter. That evening, Mark read it too. What do you want to do? He asked. I thought about everything that had happened, about trust and consequences and second chances. We can talk, I said finally. Once. In public. With rules. He nodded. That's fair. I looked at our daughter sleeping nearby. And she doesn't hold her until she says it to my face. Mark didn't hesitate. Agreed. We met Eleanor at a cafe on a weekday afternoon. Neutral ground. Public. Safe. She looked smaller than I remembered, less polished, less certain. She didn't smile when she saw me. She just said my name and waited. I let the silence stretch. Then she spoke. I was wrong, she said. About the list. About the money. About you. Her voice broke. I hurt you because I was afraid. I believed her. Not completely. But enough to listen. When she finished, I nodded once. Thank you for saying that. She looked at the stroller. May I see her? I hesitated, then gently turned it so she could. Eleanor cried silently, her hands trembling. I didn't forgive her in that moment. But I opened the door a crack. Sometimes, that's all healing starts with. After that meeting, nothing magically fixed itself. There were no warm family dinners or sudden apologies flowing freely. What changed instead was the space between us. Eleanor stopped calling. She didn't show up unannounced. She didn't comment on photos or send passive messages through relatives. The silence this time felt different. It wasn't punishment. It was restraint. And for the first time, I felt like the control had shifted away from her and back to us. The first weeks of motherhood were a blur of exhaustion and quiet joy. Late-night feedings, soft cries, the weight of my daughter sleeping on my chest. Mark was different too. More present. More aware. He noticed things now. The way I tensed when his phone rang. The way my shoulders relaxed when it wasn't his mother. One night, while rocking the baby, he said, I didn't realize how much I was asking you to endure. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, I didn't realize how much I was being trained to accept. We sat with that truth together. Lauren stayed close during that time. She visited often, helped without overstepping, asked instead of assuming. One afternoon while folding laundry, she said quietly, Mom's not doing well. I paused but kept folding. In what way? I asked. She's alone, Lauren admitted. People have stopped engaging. She says she doesn't understand why. I looked at my sleeping daughter and felt a familiar pull toward guilt, but it didn't take hold. She understands, I said calmly. She just doesn't like the answer. Weeks later, another letter arrived. Shorter this time. No explanations. Just accountability. She acknowledged the list, the manipulation, the money, the public humiliation. She wrote that therapy was forcing her to confront things she'd buried for decades. She didn't ask to be forgiven. She asked to be allowed to try. I read it twice, then put it away. Some words need time to settle before they mean anything. Mark and I talked late into the night. About boundaries. About what access really meant. About how easily old patterns could resurface if we weren't careful. If we let her back in, he said, it has to be different. I nodded. And if it isn't, I added, we don't explain ourselves again. We agreed on rules that weren't negotiable. Respect. No financial involvement. No private manipulation. No undermining us as parents. Clear consequences if any line was crossed. Writing it down felt strange, but necessary. A month later, we met Eleanor again. Same cafe. Same table. This time, she didn't talk much. She listened. When she did speak, it was measured. She apologized again, directly, without excuses. When she asked to hold her granddaughter, I didn't answer immediately. I watched her hands, her posture, her restraint. Then I nodded. She held the baby carefully, like she was afraid of doing something wrong. Maybe she was. Maybe that fear was exactly what had been missing before. Afterward, as we walked back to the car, Mark asked me quietly, "How do you feel?" I searched for the answer. Cautious, I said. But not closed. He smiled slightly. That's fair. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a battle waiting to happen. It felt uncertain, but honest. Not everyone in the family approved. Some thought we were too harsh. Others thought we weren't harsh enough. But for once, those opinions didn't matter. What mattered was the home we were building and the example we were setting. Our daughter would grow up seeing boundaries respected, not feared. She would learn that love didn't require self-erasure. That night, as I put her to sleep, I thought about the woman I'd been at the start of all this. Quiet. Careful. Afraid of causing waves. I wasn't her anymore. I didn't need to be loud to be strong. I just needed to be clear. And clarity, I'd learned, is something manipulators fear more than anger. Time did what confrontation alone never could. It slowed everything down. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and Eleanor's presence in our lives became measured, deliberate, and distant enough to breathe. She saw her granddaughter occasionally, always in public, always with one of us present. She never argued about it. Not once. That restraint told me more than any apology ever could. It meant she understood that access was no longer automatic. It was earned. Mark and I grew stronger in ways I hadn't expected. Not louder, not dramatic, just steadier. He stopped defaulting to explanations. When his mother asked why something couldn't happen, he simply said, "Because this works for us." No justifications. No negotiations. I watched him unlearn decades of conditioning in real time, and it wasn't easy. Some nights he sat quietly, wrestling with guilt that wasn't really his. I reminded him that discomfort wasn't the same thing as wrongdoing. Choosing peace over chaos always feels wrong to the person who benefited from the chaos. Lauren told me later that therapy had changed Eleanor more than any argument ever had. She's starting to see patterns, she said. The control, the fear. I nodded, but I didn't celebrate it. Change wasn't something I owed enthusiasm for. It was something she owed consistency to. One good month didn't erase years of damage. I stayed observant, not bitter, just aware. The real test came unexpectedly. One afternoon, Eleanor asked if she could take our daughter for a walk. Just her. Just once. The request was calm, almost timid. I didn't answer immediately. Mark looked at me, waiting. I shook my head gently. Not yet, I said. Eleanor didn't argue. She nodded and said, "I understand." That response mattered more than the request itself. For the first time, she accepted a no without trying to reshape it into a yes. Later that night, Mark admitted something quietly. "A year ago, I would have pushed you to agree," he said. "I would have said you were being unfair." I met his eyes. "And now?" He exhaled. "Now I see how much pressure that put on you. Growth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just shows up as a sentence that didn't exist before." Not everything was perfect. There were moments of tension, small missteps, awkward silences. Healing isn't a straight line. But it was honest. And honest effort was something I could work with. I didn't forget what Eleanor had done. I just stopped letting it define every interaction. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't about erasing memory. It's about deciding what role that memory plays going forward. One evening, while organizing old photos, I found pictures from the baby shower. Balloons. Smiles. The moment before everything cracked open. I realized something then. That day hadn't ruined anything. It had exposed what needed to be addressed before it poisoned the future. The humiliation I'd feared had turned into clarity. And clarity had changed everything. As I tucked my daughter into her crib that night, I made myself a quiet promise. She would never grow up thinking love meant enduring harm. She would never be told that her boundaries were selfish. And if one day she stood where I once stood, afraid to speak because it might upset someone powerful, I would remind her that peace built on silence is never real peace. Some families are healed by pretending nothing happened. Ours was healed by refusing to do that ever again. A few months later, on a rainy afternoon, Mark and I received an unexpected call from Lauren. Her voice sounded strained, but steady. "Mom wants to talk," she said. "She says she's ready to apologize again." I felt my heart rate rise, not from excitement, but from caution. "Where?" I asked. "She wants to come to our house," Lauren replied. "She said she doesn't want to be in a public place anymore." I looked at Mark. He looked at me. The decision wasn't easy, but it was clear. We agreed to meet her in our living room, with boundaries in place and our daughter present. Eleanor arrived with a small bouquet of flowers. She wore a simple dress, no jewelry, no makeup. It wasn't dramatic, but it was intentional. She didn't demand attention. She didn't act like she owned the room. She sat down, hands folded, and looked at me directly. The silence between us was heavy, but not cruel. It was controlled. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice quiet. "For the list. For the money. For the way I treated you." I thought I was protecting Mark, but I was hurting him. "And I was hurting you." She paused, swallowing hard. "I'd been in therapy. I've been learning about my patterns. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me prove I'm changing." I watched her carefully. She was no longer the woman who needed to win. She was the woman who needed help. I didn't respond right away. I looked at Mark, then at our daughter sleeping in her crib in the next room. I thought about everything that had happened, the humiliation, the theft, the years of manipulation. I thought about how easy it would be to let anger take over and make a decision that felt satisfying in the moment. But I also thought about the future. About what kind of family we wanted to build. I took a breath and said, "You can be in our lives, but you don't get to dictate it. You don't get to be part of our family until you show you respect us. No excuses. No manipulation. No guilt. If you cross that line again, you're gone." Eleanor nodded, tears in her eyes. "I understand," she whispered. "Thank you." She stayed for an hour, just sitting, talking softly, asking about the baby, listening instead of controlling. When she left, it didn't feel like a victory or a defeat. It felt like a new beginning, one that would require work, not just words. After she left, Mark sat down beside me. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I'm proud of us." I smiled weakly. "I'm proud of you too," I replied. "For finally seeing it." He nodded. I didn't want to believe she was capable of that, he admitted. But you forced me to look. The weeks that followed were quiet, but they were real. Eleanor continued therapy. She respected our boundaries. She didn't ask for more than we were willing to give. She visited our daughter only when we chose. She didn't demand. She didn't manipulate. She didn't make the family drama her center of gravity. And then, one evening, she sent a letter. Not a long one. Just a short note. Thank you for giving me a chance. I know I don't deserve it yet, but I'm working on it. I didn't respond immediately. I read it twice and folded it carefully. I didn't feel relieved. I didn't feel healed. I felt cautious optimism. Something I hadn't felt in years. I realized then that the story wasn't about revenge or punishment. It wasn't about proving her wrong. It was about protecting my family and refusing to let fear dictate our lives. I had been afraid for so long that speaking up would destroy everything. But it didn't. Speaking up saved us. A year after the baby shower, we celebrated our daughter's first birthday. Eleanor was there, quietly, respectfully, sitting at the edge of the room. She didn't interrupt. She didn't control. She watched from a distance, and when she spoke, it was gentle and true. When our daughter blew out her candle, Eleanor clapped softly like everyone else. She didn't try to take the spotlight. She simply stood in the background, like she finally understood what it meant to be a mother without needing to own everyone around her. That day, I looked around the room and felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not the fake kind. The kind that comes when you stop apologizing for your own existence. The kind that comes when you finally understand that boundaries are not walls, they are doors you choose to open or close. And when you choose wisely, you can protect the people you love without losing yourself.